so that we can make sure, there we go, so we can make sure that anyone who's unable to join us tonight is able to get all of this great information we're about to share tonight. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We're so excited. We have a full packed agenda, and we hope to also have some time for some Q&A. We also know, however, that we may not be able to get to everyone's questions and comments out loud. So Tashina and I will be tag teaming the chat. So if you do put a question in there and we can answer it outright, we may just go ahead and do that. So feel free to use the chat at any time during today's town hall so that we can make sure that those questions are answered for you. We also just want to do a quick reminder that if possible, keep yourself muted while you're not actively contributing to the conversation. That way we can limit the background noise and make sure everyone is able to hear whoever is speaking clearly. Thank you so much for doing that and for helping us out to make sure that everyone is able to hear. So Lucas, why don't we go ahead and get started here? So as I'm going through the agenda, I want you to think about something kind of fun. So fall is one of my favorite seasons. I love all the different fall activities, and this is a selfish question here. So why don't you go ahead and put your name, the town that you are from, and a fall activity or event in your town that you'd recommend into the chat box. That way we can test out the chat. You can find it once more if you haven't been on Zoom in a while. And we can have those fall activities to do all fall long. So go ahead and put those in as we're going through the agenda. So for our time together today, we are going to start off, obviously, with our welcome here. We will then be talking about the evolution of Greater Together Community Fund, where it came from, where we're going with it, and why some of the changes that are coming down the pike. We are going to invite some of our colleagues in from the community impact team to share some aligning of the Greater Together Community Fund grant making with community impact principles and values. And this was something that was requested in some of the surveys that we took. So we're really happy to be able to have that conversation today. We will also give some program updates about the status of the grant making system, as well as other updates and events that are coming, and some announcements. And we'll do a closing and next steps. So just to kind of see in the chat, we've got a lot of fun activities going on in Greater Hartford this season, but we've got some representation pretty much all over. I see Hebron and East Windsor and Bloomfield, Hartford, South Windsor, Somers, Andover, Bolton, Hartford, Windsor, Vernon, Glastonbury, Manchester, Granby, East Windsor. We've got the whole group here. So thank you, everyone. We will go ahead and continue on, but keep those suggestions coming because I'm sure there are a few other people here that love those fall activities and are probably taking notes. But now why don't we go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Lucas, who's going to walk us through the evolution of the Greater Together Community Fund.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I'm really excited to see all the recommendations. And we will capture the chat because we want to make sure that all the questions that come up in the chat we'll have answers to, and we can share it with the follow-up materials from the meeting. And so we'll make sure to include the recommendations as well. That might be fun to share it with all the volunteers. It's such a great opportunity for me to be here with you again in our quarterly town halls. Really excited about our meeting today. Our team, every at the beginning of the quarter, we get together and we're always thinking about like, okay, what do we need to share with the volunteers this quarter? And we thought it would be really important for us to take a step back and actually talk a little bit about the evolution of the program and all that has happened in the last 5 years of the program. And to put it into context when we are experiencing all of the changes that are happening, putting into the context of like what are the existing goals of the program, how far we've come, and where we're headed. I think it's good context to have. And we have Jay here as well, who will right after this little presentation. Jay, I'm going to invite you in and share some thoughts as someone who envisioned community funds from the beginning. And so I'm excited to hear from you as well. I have this slide here, and these are the three goals of the community Greater Together Community Funds program, right? And so we think about all that we do. We think about how are we supporting communities taking ownership around the needs of their towns. Two, how do we encourage broad and inclusive civic engagement? And three, how do we anchor the foundation in each town that we serve? Um, and so, if you all remember, community funds came out of the listening sessions that happened in 2018, 2019. Some of you were present, and some of you have been part of the program since since its inception. And so, we wanted to ground folks on the goals of the program once again as we talk about all that has happened in the program in the last 5 years or so. I put together this timeline. It's obviously not an extensive timeline about everything that has happened, but when we think about like the program wide or the program development, I wanted to share with you some of the key things that happen in each year of the program. And so we think back to 2019 when steering committees were formed in each of your towns to recruit members to join the committee. In 2020 is when we started to see committees being formed and meetings starting to happen. And obviously with COVID, that was a interesting start to a program like this, right? And from the beginning, we've always wanted to be a learning program or learn from the program. And so in 2020, some of you may remember we had we brought on our partners, the Collaborative Education Services. We brought them on really early on into the program so that we like study like how will committees form, like what are some of the things that will happen in the life cycle of a committee, of a volunteer. And so they came on in 2020. And so I wanted to put here the first grant was in March 2021. That was the first grant recommendation. So shout out to South Windsor. You actually were the first town to offer a grant. I don't know if there's anyone from South Windsor here, but I wanted to get that shout out. Right after that, it was a slew of committees that offered grants. In 22 and 23, if some of you that were here remember, each committee had an equity training, right? There was a lot of conversation about how do we embed equity practices in the work that we're doing. In 23, CES, our consultants at the time, completed its 3-year evaluation. And within that evaluation, and we still have all the reports. I noticed that our resources page, like the reports aren't there, so we'll make sure to include the reports and give you all a link to them. But there was a lot of program recommendations from that 3-year evaluation of the beginning of the program, and some of those recommendations we're implementing them now. So I just to think about it, the top two that came to mind was I think from that evaluation, the ask for the foundation to continuously invest into the current use fund. That was a recommendation that came out of this evaluation. Also, how do we support volunteers or the individuals experiencing the program through guidance and tools? That was also a recommendation. So it's exciting to see sort of the how the program has been evolving. In 2024, the program became an official program of the foundation. So we used to have terms such as project and initiative, and but it was in early in 2024 where we really became a program, in a program housed under community impact, which we realized we haven't talked a lot about that, and so I'm excited for our colleagues to be here and so we can share with you all more context about how this program fits into the foundation. 2024 was also a very busy year for us. We did the quarterly town halls in the community. We had a couple of community cafes around data and grant making and volunteer recruitment. In 2025, we started off the year strong on January 7th, my birthday, with the centennial announcement about the investments into community funds and the annual investments that each current use fund will get, as well as we released some of the things that we've been working on, the handbook, starting to think about all of the ways that we can streamline some of the programmatic and behind the scenes sort of things for the program. I wanted to update you all on some of the current stats for the program. So we have 29 towns that have been established, over 700 volunteers. We have 228 current volunteers, and a lot of folks are also, or we have an additional number that's like folks that are on the pipelines that are have applied and are still going through sort of the conversations with you all and haven't signed the agreement yet. But these are 228 people that signed the volunteer agreement. We have made, as of September 9, 872 grants through this process, totaling $3.44 million. And I was asking our grants administration team to see if we could have an updated list, because even in the last 2 weeks, there's been many of you that have submitted your recommendations, and I know a lot of you have open grant cycles now. So in December, I'll try to update this slide again so that we can see how these numbers have changed. And I'm always impressed by the last statistics here, which 48% of grantees that are coming in through this process are brand new to the foundation. So have not received any grant from the foundation. And that is still, going back to our program goals, anchoring the foundation in each of your towns. You are opening the doors to the foundation. And also for us, we are getting to know so many organizations and things and projects that are happening in your town. So my last slide here before I invite Jay in to share a little bit more his thoughts. But as we're continuing sort of these like program-wide enhancements in 2026 and beyond, I asked our team to like, how do we synthesize? Like, what are our four main things that we want our volunteers to know? One is we really want to be able to support you in your volunteer experience as you engage with the program. And so we're trying our best to continuously update the volunteer handbook, which we're working on for the next iteration, and offer you all more guidance and tools. You've probably seen, in the last 2 years or so, we've been doing a lot of surveys and a lot of conversations with you all. We want the feedback loops to be open and to really honor the input that you have in for the program and for your experience. We are thinking very intentionally about the capacity building of your committees, but also the leadership development of you as individual volunteers. So thinking about the learning opportunities. And lastly, which we're going to get to talk to today, the how do we coordinate grant making and learning so that it's a two-way reciprocal sort of learning relationship between the foundation and all of the work that happens here in this building, and with you all in your towns. It's really exciting to see all the grants that are coming up through this system, and we're learning so much. And there's so much more opportunity for us to learn even further. And so with that being said, Jay, I wanted to invite you in here and see if you can share some remarks and say hello to everyone.
Thank you, Lucas. And indeed, hello, good evening. It is good to see you all. I appreciate the opportunity when we convene around our quarterly town halls. I was thinking as Melissa was doing some of the introductory remarks of favorite fall activity. And it's not necessarily a fall activity, it's an activity that I love, and that is playing golf. But I love particularly to play in the fall. It's bittersweet because it means the end of the season, but I like playing because I've been to all of your towns in some way, shape, or form, many of them in my quest to play various golf courses and to be able to play when the leaves are still on the trees, the color is robust, and I can still find my ball, not buried under the pile of leaves. But the other thing is that as I was looking at some of the suggestions, my wife and I, every other Friday, we like find some place to eat breakfast. So I'm always curious for those of you in your respective towns, if you have a favorite breakfast spot. No disrespect to the chain breakfast spots, but for the little place that you may not know unless you are living in that town. If you throw those in the chat, it always is exciting for me to go with my wife, or when I'm playing golf, I'll leave early specifically go to eat breakfast. So I already see Isaacs and Bloomfield. Oh, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. So some of these places I've been, and I promise you, between now and the next quarterly town hall, I will try to have been to go to the rest of them. So each time we gather, it just reminds all of us of the incredible commitment that you've made to the Greater Together Community Funds volunteer initiative, this program, as Lucas has talked about. It is a lot of work, but it is energizing work. It's a lot of work for you all as volunteers. It's a lot of work for the staff. I want to acknowledge that, but it is energizing. It is reinvigorating our excitement about serving in each of the communities. And as Lucas took us down sort of the memory lane of the early days of the listening tour, and this did literally come out of the conversations that I and the staff were having with your towns about how we could be more engaged, how we could anchor ourselves. So this many years later to still see and the evolution of the program, but also that original intent to anchor and engage and to cultivate, grant making and participatory volunteerism is just really something that we are all exceptionally proud of. And it's humbling to know that this originated because we were in conversation with you. We were listening to what you all have said about your communities. And your work has made a difference. To hear the stats of the $3+ million in grants, the 800+ grants that have been made, all 29 towns engaging, the 700+ volunteers over the course of time, the 230+ remind us that are currently in place or in the pipeline. It really just reminds me how fortunate I am to be able to get up and go to work with a group of colleagues, many of whom are represented here, others who aren't necessarily on the screen, and then more along those lines, the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been an amazing year. You're clearly aware that this is our centennial year, and the first announcement of our centennial year, Lucas also referenced, was directly a result of his birthday, but also the secondary was the fact that we wanted to make that $100,000 investment in each of our towns just to renew that commitment along with the regular annual funding. So we've learned a lot. We've grown over the many years, but specifically even over this year, about how to strengthen the program and how integral it is to our mission. Like, this is a permanent part of the foundation, not a special program that maybe has a limited shelf life. So to that end, this is who we are, this is what we do, and we could not do it without you. As you're also aware, we've been making some updates, streamlining the grant making process, the volunteer management tools, aligning more closely with our community impact principles, which has been an evolving process. And in doing that, we recognize that these changes sometimes can be a little uncomfortable. At times they've been disruptive. So thank you for your patience and for your forgiveness. And know that these changes are not happening in a vacuum, that the Greater Together Community Funds program and the enhancements are a part of our ethos as a learning organization. When something works, we want to understand and solidify and sustain what works. When something doesn't work, we want to learn why and how to improve it. We as human beings make errors. We as an organization make errors, but they are all made in this regard with good intent to ultimately serve our communities, to serve our nonprofits, and to do it through the partnerships for all the things that we care about. So again, thank you for your patience as we continue to try to improve the process and the tools that we use. You will be hearing from some of the colleagues that I reference. It really is, just to get up every day and work with them directly and indirectly, both in our office and out in the community. The expertise, the passion, and the commitment that they bring really is exciting and humbling. So you're going to hear from them about how the community funds program fits into the respective departments. So, we've got sort of the major divisions when we talk about the foundation, our community impact, which is, the grant making, what we're now calling advancement, or is often known as development, where we really engage our donors. We have our communications and marketing and our finance and administration. Each of those is led by a VP and directors and teams, and they all have subcategories. So those are the broad areas, but they all have different sub departments within them. But at the end of the day, it's about working together, making sure we're rowing in the same direction. So, as we talk about these changes, sometimes feeling disruptive, sometimes feeling hard. My wife and I tease our son, who's 15. He's a creature of habit, and when his habits are disrupted or things he's comfortable with disrupted, we hear about it, and we try to minimize it to the greatest extent possible. But in a effort of continuous improvement, we do sometimes have to make those changes, and we don't take lightly the changes, and it is always with an effort to improve. So we'll continue to try to make things as smooth as possible, support you, be with you every step of the way, here when we've done well, and here when we can do better, because we are all in this together. I just want to take a moment to recognize our liaisons, Tashina and Melissa. The role they play as your liaison is something very special, because, again, they represent the foundation in every way, and they also represent you as the 29 communities that we serve. So there's a diversity of communities and perspectives and opinions and needs and resources, and they are the ones to try to filter all of that and interpret that in a way that really allows us to achieve the goals of the program. So they are advocates in your voices, and they are very proud to reflect what is coming out of each of the communities. So continue to partner with them. Please see them as a resource. Leverage their knowledge, their expertise, their passion to forge deeper relationships with each of the towns. And finally, as we look ahead, so this is, we are now on the last day of September, racing toward the end of the year, of the centennial year, looking forward to next year. There are going to be many challenges and opportunities that we will navigate together. But there are some exciting things on the horizon. I have been mentioning this. We have been mentioning this all year long. We mentioned it in our celebrations and convenings earlier in the year about our gala on December 5th, or our event on December 5th, which will cap off our centennial year. And there are some significant, surprising announcements that we are going to share. We hope that you are there in person. Even if not, you will experience them as they are announced and continue to evolve and take shape in the coming years. We're also looking forward to our first ever Greater Together Community Funds Volunteer Summit in February. That's going to be an exciting event. And these are, again, opportunities to continue to convene, to celebrate, to learn, and to shape the future together. So thank you for being along this journey with us. From the very inception and thought of having a listening tour, we couldn't have imagined it would result in such a rich, deep engagement and long-standing and sustaining engagement. You've helped us immensely in ways that, again, were beyond what we could have imagined. So we're going to keep moving forward and improving, keep making an impact in each and every one of the 29 towns that we serve. So with that being said, look forward to the conversation, questions, comments this evening. I'll turn it back over to the staff.
Thank you so much, Jay, for always showing up and sticking through and being a great partner in this work as well, here at the foundation. I wanted to move us forward a little bit so that we could get through a lot of really great stuff and content so that we can engage with you all via questions and comments. And as Jay mentioned, and as I mentioned as well, as we were planning for this town hall, we thought it would be really important to put the community funds program in the context of all the other things that are happening at the foundation. And when we say that the community funds program is a program of the foundation, it's a program of the foundation that's also housed within our community impact department. And so we've asked our colleague Kate Serbaki to join us today, as well as Juhi, and you'll hear from Juhi in a little bit, to really share with you all what's happening here when we think about community impact and the work that we do in community impact. So I'm going to invite Kate in, and Kate, if you want to introduce yourself before we jump in, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thanks, Lucas. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Serbaki. I use she and her pronouns. I'm so excited to be here today. It was so cool to hear Lucas and Jay talk about the evolution of the program because I joined the foundation as part of our research and evaluation unit in 2018 when we were finishing up those listening tours, Jay, and I got to see the launch of the steering and selection committees and go around to all these towns and was part of bringing on an evaluator. And it's really cool to see stats that Lucas shared, like that 48% of the grantees that you're making grants to are new to the foundation. That's a stat that the evaluator suggested that we keep, so we really understand how that you folks are broadening the reach of the foundation and really keeping us local and responsive to local needs. But I also am pretty excited because I feel like I would just watch Jay launch a new part of the foundation, which was Jay's breakfast directory, which I think can be found in the chat, and I certainly hope goes on the resource page. So I've seen a lot of launching of new things here, from listening tours to the community funds, and now we have a breakfast directory, and breakfast is by far my favorite meal of the day. So thank you, Jay. Thank you so much for that. So anyway, I'm Kate Serbaki. I work as the Director of Learning Evaluation and Capacity Building. We have also become part of CI. Learning and Evaluation actually started off in Jay's office and has moved into CI. So we're all in good company, but you can advance the slide, Lucas, and I'll talk a little bit about what we hope you walk away with today. So we have a short amount of time, so hopefully I'm not, hitting you with a fire hose of information, and you can feel free to put things in the chat. Tashina and Melissa are going to keep me updated with things that you're putting in there, and we'll have a Q&A after I'm done giving you some sense of what goes on in community impact and how community funds is part of this department. We do want to give you a taste of some of the big guiding principles that we work with in CI and sort of serve as guardrails or guideposts to the work we do. One of those things is really getting nonprofit feedback and really understanding what our impact is in the community, but what we can do better in terms of our processes, including grant making. And then really talking to you a little bit about how overall CI process improvement can be inclusive of community funds and what we can all learn together. So you can advance the slides. This is something that is I feel like an almost overwhelming figure because it really shows the many parts and functions within CI. You'll see things that you probably would expect to see, like learning and evaluation. So something that I lead, our capacity building function that mostly sits in our nonprofit support program, where organizations can receive grants or participate in programs that strengthen their nonprofit operations. We have outcome teams, which is mostly our grant making. So grants that are foundation directed that go out into community for operations or programs and projects. We do public policy work. So we submit testimony in service to the outcomes that we're focused on and our strategic commitments. We also engage in strategic partnerships. A notable one is the Connecticut Urban Opportunity Collaborative, where we work with the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven and Fairfield County's Community Foundation to do work around dismantling structural racism and advancing social and economic mobility. So there's a lot of partnerships work there. And then last but not least is your work, is the Greater Together Community Funds, which is another expression of the foundation's grant making, but it is obviously, as you all know, located in each of the 29 towns in our catchment. I'm going to advance the slide, Lucas, please. So I'm going to go pretty quickly over this, but I think it's important to just state what our strategic commitment is, as well as our mission, which is pretty broad. We're here to create lasting solutions that will result in vibrant communities, your communities in the 29 towns within our region. And then our two broad commitments are dismantling structural racism and advancing equitable and economic and social mobility. It's a mouthful. If you want to read more about this, I suggest clicking on the link where it says our strategic commitment. Tashina, Melissa, Lucas are going to share these slides with you afterwards so you can read about these things more in depth. If you have questions about these, I'm happy to answer them, or your liaisons and Lucas can dig in. Can go to the next, Lucas, please. Thanks. So how we focus on these broad strategic commitments, one of the ways at any rate is through our grant making, through our foundation directed annual grant making. We really take a look at that mission of creating vibrant communities with those lasting solutions, and then really concentrate on dismantling structural racism and advancing social and economic mobility. This is a lot of information and you can dig in, but we have 5 outcome areas as well as a responsive grant making team. As you can see, we're a community foundation, so we're fairly broad based. We're focused on arts, basic needs, civic and resident engagement, employment opportunities that I just want to note is inclusive of K-12 and post-secondary education, and then thriving neighborhoods, which sounds a little opaque, but that really means neighborhood quality. So how well people are connected, their built environment, things like quality housing, and places for people to enjoy. Our community leadership function kind of rings a bell always with me with community funds because it's a way that we can engage in exploratory strategies or engage in power shifting where we might give grants so that others can make grants in our region. So that's something that always rings as a little bit of a similarity between our grant making and the grant making that happens in community funds. Lucas, you can advance the slide if you'd like. So where does community funds fit in? Again, you saw yourselves in that larger circle. We really view, and I hope you've already seen this and experienced this through your work with Tashina and Melissa and other liaisons, is that each town fund and volunteer, you're a partner in implementing our broader work. You're a part of making our communities vibrant ones and coming up with solutions that respond to the needs and the strengths in your town. So how is this even happening? Where are we getting sort of this bi-directional relationship where we're learning from what you're doing and you're learning from what we're doing? So I just wanted to note some things that have come up in other parts of CI. We really do pay attention to what Melissa, Tashina, and Lucas have to tell us in staff meetings. They're really able to tell us that this participatory grant making is an innovative practice where we're sharing power with so many of you that are making excellent decisions and thoughtful decisions in your community, that you're being responsive again to those local needs and local strengths that you know are so deeply have such deep expertise in. Again, I'm really happy to see Lucas sharing those new organizations. We're seeing organizations come in that are new to us that we've never made a grant to. That's very exciting. It's helpful for us to understand our nonprofit landscape in that way. We're also seeing new approaches, new work that is being done in those communities through the approval of the grants that you're making. I just wanted to note this, as a learning and evaluation person, I've just seen such interest from you folks. I see some familiar faces that came to the community cafes that addressed using data in grant making and membership recruitment. And it's just so exciting to me that you really want to dig in even further to what's going on in your communities so that you can make grants in response to that. I just wanted to shout out, I've met with Granby to talk about how you might be doing community forums to assess what's going on in your town. I saw a beautiful white paper that Glastonbury produced that really looked at some community data and your response to it. I'm so excited to see that showing up in your work, and we really can learn from that as well. Lucas, if you can go on. So one of the biggest guiding principles that comes up in community impact, and I think this really shows up whether you go to a grant making team meeting, if you're talking about a CI staff meeting, these are things that we think about a lot, especially when we think about our grant making process, is trust-based philanthropy. And that's a mouthful too. And I think there's a lot of words or feelings that come up when we think about trust, but I wanted to make an attempt to make this concrete. Also, I just want to note that that trust-based philanthropy principles phrase is highlighted. There's a link to it, to the trust-based philanthropy project that will tell you all about this work and what's happening in the broader field, how community foundations are practicing this, how private foundations. I think it might be of interest, but I just wanted to highlight some basic tenets that we try to embrace. One of them is doing your homework. So not relying on grantees or nonprofits to jump through hoops, but really being knowledgeable about what their work is before they even come in and talk to us through grant applications. And I think that's actually kind of the beauty of community funds is you're really much more on the ground and much more local and sensitive to organizations doing work in your towns. And that's something that we try to keep in mind too, that we're keeping up to date with what organizations are doing. We are visiting their websites. We're using their organizational profiles in our grants management system to really understand who they are even before they submit an application to us. Second of all, that's huge, and I hope we touch on a lot today, is keeping it simple. So I'm about to talk about a project that we went through to really streamline and tighten and make more equitable our grants process, specifically soup to nuts, how people come in through inquiry, how they fill out their applications, how they do reporting, keeping that simple as possible so that grantees are freed up to do important work in community. Also being open and responsive. I think this is a little bit related to being streamlined. So being timely, not making work burdensome or taking a long time, being very clear about what you want to know, being adhering to what you need to know, and rather what's nice to know in applications, things of that nature. We're also going to talk about listening and acting on feedback. I think Lucas, Melissa, Tashina have done an incredible job with my colleague Juhi to really get feedback from you folks about how you're experiencing this volunteer program. We do the same with nonprofits. We do the same with grantees. We want to know how they're experiencing our grants process and their relationship with us. There's some other things that I think are a little bit more within the CI in other ways, but I did want to highlight them. Going beyond the check is a trust-based practice that's doing things like building the capacity of organizations. So their financial management, their executive leadership, their technology, their ability to use data. We often express this through our nonprofit support program and the grants and programs that unit within CI runs. Lucas does a lot of that work, so shout out to Lucas for working with a lot of our small organizations. And then something else that we do through our annual grant making is we make multi-year and often unrestricted funds, so operating support grants. I think the nature of community funds is a little bit different. It's sometimes smaller grants over a shorter period of time, but I think there's something here that really hits home to me when we talk about any grant making, and that is grant making in service of change takes time. That we are talking about complex problems in communities, sometimes wicked problems that will take time to change. It will take a lot of time, talent, and effort overall to change. So having patience and really sticking with communities and nonprofits who are trying to do this work. You can advance the slide. Thanks, Lucas. So something else that comes up to me, really sitting as the director of learning and evaluation, but I think this is something that's really carried through all the foundation learning. And as Jay highlighted, we're really a learning organization, is that when we're doing learning work, when we're trying to get feedback from any one of our stakeholders, whether it's you folks as community funds volunteers, whether it's our nonprofits, grantees, even staff, we're really using learning to advance equity. We're keeping our eye on the ball and trying to make our work more inclusive and more equitable for everyone. The processes themselves should be equitable. We're trying to center grantees or community in defining what impact is, what success looks like for them, really trying to make that something that isn't just defined by the foundation. Also, making sure that the foundation and everyone involved, everyone who's involved here on this screen, is also subject to really learning. That we're not just learning about what's happening in community, what nonprofits are doing, but how can we make our processes, how can we make our tools and resources work better for everyone? And then again, just going deeper beyond impact, not so much what did all our funded programs do, but how did the foundation's practices help or hinder that work? If you want to dig in a little bit more on some of these equitable approaches, I'd hit that link at the bottom. And when this gets disseminated, slide deck. I encourage you to take a look at that. It's quite interesting. Thank you, Lucas. So I wanted to talk about this kind of principle in action. So, equitable learning and really equitable learning for process improvement. How can we streamline our processes to really let grantees do the work that they're doing in community and not focus so much on the paperwork, or not so much paperwork anymore, but doing it digitally on our online platform? So, it is essential to improve process and adapt tools, because sometimes what once worked becomes outdated very quickly, especially as technology changes, as our understanding of community changes, preferences of nonprofits, what's working. We need to be nimble and we need to reflect on our practices and improve them. So in 2021, it was determined by the foundation that we really needed to take a look at our grants process. I put it in here, soup to nuts is what we called it. So, how organizations come into us, how they fill out applications, what we're asking them in applications, all the way through reporting, and then coming in for another grant. So, I know you all can take a look at this slide, but I do want to just point out that we wanted to make sure that community, and community as defined by all residents in community, towns, nonprofits, grantees, are at the center of all grant decisions, that we are treating grantees and nonprofits as trusted partners that are giving us reliable, useful information, that we're trying to minimize that burden of filling out applications and talking to us instead of doing the important work in community, whether that's providing food through a food pantry, running an after school program, whatever folks are doing, they're focused on that rather than our administrative processes, making it as inclusive and as accessible as possible, and then also making sure a lot of this ends up in our online technology platform so that all that information is being collected and compiled in one place. It's not living outside that program, or excuse me, that platform, and that we're actually using that information that we're collecting from grantees as data. We're treating it as very valuable information that we can learn from. Lucas, if you can advance the slide. So this learning process to improve or redesign our grants process soup to nuts involved a lot of data collection, a lot of analysis, and a lot of folks trying to tell us how we could make it better. So we did a lot of in-depth focus groups and conversations with staff who were able to bring experiences from the nonprofits that they work with, saying, I've heard this, I've heard that. This is a challenge. This is a great practice that we should lean into. We took a look at a ton of literature, a ton of organizational memos, notes, reports, papers, emails, just to figure out what were the best practices that we could lean into. We did a grantee survey. Over 150 different nonprofits replied to an open-ended question, long form survey where they gave us a lot of details about what they were frustrated with, what they liked, what they thought we could do better. We were able to redesign all of our applications and create standard application questions. This wasn't where we kind of stood pat. We had a DEI consultant look at it. We had many of our CI staff review it. And it was also reviewed by 16 organizations who volunteered and were, by the way, stipended for their work in looking at our application, saying, yes, this is something that will work better for us. So some of what we put into action, again, I'm not going to read all these bullets, and I hope you take the opportunity to really look at the many things we changed, but I want to highlight a few things. The process from a CI perspective, community impact perspective, all of our applications, whether that's an application for a project grant, operating core support, different RFPs we run, the nonprofit support program grants, that's all in our grants management system. We don't have paper, we don't have things flying around. We have standardized questions that are in our grants management system. I'm just thinking some questions coming up in the chat. Tashina, feel free to lift some if you'd like. All of that lives inside of our platform. We're also able to use that because they're all standardized. We're able to use that as data to look at our grant making behavior. I also want to note that those standardized questions are written in more accessible ways. They're no longer double barreled. They're written in culturally responsive ways. And they were vetted by real nonprofits. We've also added some resources to helping people fill out applications, like guidelines to how to develop outcomes, a sample budget, and things like that. You can advance the slide, Lucas. So we engage in more learning beyond this redesigned process. Last year, we used the Center for Effective Philanthropy's Grantee Perception Study. This is a gold standard survey of grantees where we're able to survey the grantees or nonprofits that get grants from the foundation and compare their perception of our work to past surveys that we've done. So we did this in 2017 as well. And we're able to compare our performance against other foundations. So other community foundations, other foundations of our size. As you can see, we received a pretty good response rate. This is pretty competitive with the field of about 58% of our grantees responded. There's a nice little hyperlink there if you want to dig into the responses, what we're doing well, what we're doing not so well. You can hop in there and see what we found. One of the things that I'll highlight in a moment is the length of time. The average length of time that people say it takes to complete our applications has dropped significantly, which was sort of an implied goal of that grants process redesign that we engaged in. I think someone asked in the chat if we survey folks that don't get grants, the folks that are failed to be awarded through our grants process. And I think it actually comes up here in this nice yellow box. We have also launched a post-application survey. So anyone that fills out our application, whether they receive a grant or not, can anonymously give us feedback about our application process. And we're learning a ton from that. We're learning that they need more supports in filling out our application. We're learning that they've appreciated that they can get through the application faster. There's a nice little summary of that feedback if you click that link sometime after this webinar. But we've been getting excellent responses, and we're continuing to collect that information from folks who fill out our applications. We also, I'm going to go pretty quickly through this, as we are using those grants data that exist in our platform to look at the type of grants that we're making, to what type of organizations, and really keep ourselves accountable to being a funder that funds all sorts of organizations with all types of grants. And then something I really wanted to mention is we don't just rely on formal data collection efforts like surveys or an administrative data that comes in through applications. We also just listen to folks in convenings, at networking events, on one-on-one conversations with grantees. These things trickle into the foundation and we act on them.
Kate, can I give you a 2-minute
Sure,
Q&A
thank you.
warning? No
Yep.
problem.
And I'm going to go over this one really quickly. As you can see, our median hours spent on preparing a proposal, or what we would call an application, dropped from 25 hours in 2017 to a median response of 10 hours, which is pretty considerable. You can move us on, Lucas. So what does this all mean for the community funds? I think what this means, and Tashina, Melissa, and Lucas can talk about this at a more granular level, but the processes that we've developed, or the improved and streamlined applications, these can inform or be what is used in community funds. We've gotten so much grantee input, so much grantee feedback. We've stress tested it. We continue to improve these processes. Hopefully, community funds can benefit from these improvements as well. So putting the application in our GLM, our grants management platform, we're going to be able to have it all exist in one place. The data or the information that nonprofits give us through their application can be treated as data, compiled, segmented, analyzed. We can run some stats about what's coming into us through those processes. Again, you can benefit from those standardized, staff-reviewed, grantee-reviewed questions. We've also shifted our reporting to reporting that is really grantee-led. So grantees are telling us what is manageable, feasible, and rigorous that they collect and how they measure their work. I also think bringing us all into sort of one process, treating all CI grant making as one, really leads to a lot of great co-learning and mutual adaptation. So if we're all using the same platform, using similar questions, we're all able to say, how's this working in different areas of our grant making, and really share, as Jay said earlier, where we can do better, and making those little insights go beyond just one person hearing it, but the whole team hearing it. Lucas, I'm all set with this one. So again, what do I want you to walk away with? What does the team want you to walk away with from my portion of the presentation or our town hall tonight? Really, hopefully hearing that community funds are just an integral part of the community impact department at the Hartford Foundation. The community impact itself as a department, but I would say that this is foundation wide. I'm looking at Jay. We're really guided by these trust-based and equitable principles. These are how we live and breathe our work. They're central to what we do. And really, part of that is always including the perspectives and experiences of our partners, specifically our nonprofit partners, but really residents in general. And that trust and equity guidelines require us not to just get that feedback, but to act on it, to keep improving our tools and our processes. So I just want to leave us with this, and I've probably gone over to Sheena. I'm so sorry that we're never really going to get to perfection. There's always a chance to learn more and do better. We're not striving for perfection. This is something a consultant of ours once said to me. We're not striving for perfection. We're striving for excellence. So we're striving to do better all the time. And I think that's just something important to keep in mind. Thanks.
All right, Kate, to kick us off, we do have one question in the chat from Debbie. With a standard grant process, how do you address different strategic outcomes for different nonprofit sectors?
I think we have strived to create questions that are broad enough that so people can really speak to what their work is, but speak with specificity to what their own goals are. Um, that I think that's kind of the needle that we've threaded. So we're asking, trying to find questions that are being very specific, that are very focused, but that can be adapted by whether an organization is running a after school program again, a food pantry, doing community organizing work, that they can really find themselves in the question and speak clearly and effectively to that work.
And to add on that, the community funds will still be able to develop an RFP that can highlight any specific priorities that are reflective in their town. So that will still be an option in terms of applicants being able to speak to specific priorities highlighted through committees. Kate, we have another question in the chat. Let's see. It would be important to continue to solicit feedback from community fund applicants so that we do not think it takes 10 or so hours. We will need to assess whether the application will be. So I think it's just some food for thought for us to continue to evaluate how the community fund applications are being received from applicants.
Well, the great news is that putting it all in one platform is that community funds, grantees or nonprofits applying through community funds will get that post-application survey. We actually have added a time to completion on that. We'll be able to disaggregate or segment or categorize what grants were community fund grants so we can start to get a sense of course, the survey is voluntary and it's anonymous, but we would be able to break it out by community funds grants and see kind of what that median is. I think the next time we do that grantee perception study, that's something we might want to look at is how does community funds grantees compared to other CI grants and their median completion time. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't even know how to hypothesize what the average or median time to complete is for each of our grant types, but it's something to keep our eye on.
And if I could jump in here really quickly, Kate, for those of you that don't know, another portfolio that I oversee here at the foundation through the capacity building is supporting our strategies and overseeing our strategies and supporting small organizations applying through our processes. And so we've been engaging in a lot of learning around how small organizations and all the entry points for small organizations through our outcomes teams and what kinds of resources, what kinds of templates. I know someone put on the chat, we will need a budget template of sorts that are helpful to organizations foundations that are emerging and are sort of on the smaller end of their sort of life cycle. And so we've been sort of doing a lot of that work already at the foundation for the last few years. And again, as Kate mentioned, with all in one system, I think the data and the feedback loops and the engagement that we'll have with smalls will be a lot more sort of intentional.
Thanks, Lucas. Are there other questions?
Yeah,
Free to
so can
as well.
I follow up on Tashina? You said that that you're still allowing towns to come up with their own RFP. So then if towns come up with their own RFP, does that mean that nonprofits in our town would apply twice? They would apply once through the common application at the Hartford Foundation and then through our own RFP?
I think that that's a great question, Laura. So the RFP is like the instructions to the application. So the application itself will be facilitated through the Hartford Foundation's GLN platform, but the committees still have the ability to develop an RFP, which is like the instructions to what are the priority areas that the committee wants to focus on. That information is still there. It is a request for a proposal. It's almost an announcement, but the tool, the vehicle is still the application that will still go through the one source of the foundation's platform.
Okay. So if a town looks at the common application and feels strongly that they have data elements that were not identified, can towns create an addendum or, to add additional data elements to collect those for their analysis of the grants?
One way I think you could capture that, Laura, is if you added into your RFP something like the committee would love to hear in your answers X, Y, or Z, right? The focus on X, Y, or Z when you answer the questions. That would be your way to kind of guide how they're shaping the answers to those questions to make sure that you're getting the data that you need.
Okay. So I know and sorry, I don't want to monopolize anybody's time here, but I know that, this might be a moot point. Like it might be that all of Glastonbury's, for example's application questions are completely, one by one covered by the Common App. So there might not need to do anything. But when will towns be able to get a preview of the Common Application? I know you're going to beta test it and what have you, but when will we even see
Yeah.
a static copy?
So Laura, we're actually going to be covering that in a little bit. So do you mind if I just hold that question until we get to that part of the town hall?
No, absolutely. That's fine.
Laura, sorry, I'm just jumping in here as well. One of the things that we have in all of our processes as well, outside of community funds, all our grant making, we do have questions and fields where folks can add any sort of additional information that they would like to share with us. And so I've been working with our grant administration team and the process redesign team to see, are there opportunities, for example, where we can link the application back to your landing pages so that if there's any instructions on like any additional documents to include for them to use that space to do so. And then another sort of component of grant review, as you all know, is you might have follow-up questions, right? And so we don't want to take that away from you as well. And so you'll continue to be able to, like, if there are any clarifying questions, if you want to have a conversation with any applicant, you'll still be able to do that as well. And so we're trying to play around with the mechanics behind the scene of like how do we link the common application back to your landing pages and your RFPs where it'll sort of share what the priority is for the committee.
Lucas, will this may be jumping ahead, will the common application have the ability for people to upload required documents like organization budget, project budget, letters of support, what have you?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a lot easier than I know that some of your process now, a lot of you use Google Forms or like we have organizations email you all of their material, right? So with the our online portal, we can package all the application, all of the answers and the attachments in one file to send you all. So I'm excited about that. That's definitely going to cut down a lot of the administration of keeping track of documents and materials.
Okay. All righty. If we could, I think we are going to conclude the Q&A at this point, as we just want to be efficient with time, but please continue to post your questions in the chat, or feel free to send emails and let us know if you have any additional questions.
All right. So, as we're moving on, we're going to do a little bit more of our grant making update. So, this is going to be in two parts. And the first part, we're going to really talk about the application questions and what has happened so far with that. So, in talking about assessing application questions, first, I want to reflect back, right? So, the first thing I want to just remind everyone that we are doing that grant making pause from November 16th to March 31st. So our go live date is April 1st for that new common application. But also just making sure everyone remembers, if you have an open grant cycle, that all of those documents and recommendations do need to be into us by November 15th at the latest. Our community funds grant making, one thing we want to let you know, I think there was a bit of a misconception that this was a new technology, right? So this is not new technology. It's being added to the grant lifecycle manager. So this is already an existing grant making portal in the Hartford Foundation that they have been using for all different types of processes. So I know I've been getting the question a lot of, what if the technology is not ready for April 1st? You can put that out of your mind. The technology is already being used, it's already ready, so you don't have to worry about that piece. So thinking about what has happened so far, Juhi in a moment, my colleague, is going to talk a little bit more about this one. So there was an analysis of all the committee application questions. You also saw the data on that. There was an infographic that was sent out, as well as a survey attached to it. So she's also going to go over some of the results of that survey. And Tashina and I have been meeting with all of the chairs, committee chairs, throughout the last couple weeks, and sharing the potential 2026 process with them, gathering their thoughts, their questions, their feedback, to help influence where we go from there and how we share that full process with you as well. So without further ado, I would love to welcome our colleague from our learning team, which is Juhi. Juhi, would you like to introduce yourself and your role and kick us off with that analysis?
Thank you so much, Melissa, and hello, everyone. Juhi Vajpayee Goli, I'm a Learning and Evaluation Officer. Hello again, actually, because I think it was almost exactly a year ago that I attended a previous town hall meeting to share findings on just, the volunteer experience. So it's good to be back, and it's good to see familiar and new faces and names. I will kick us off with the short reflection survey that some of you responded to. But before I do that, I'll quickly thank you for participating in this survey and sharing your feedback. And B, just touch upon, the brief mapping exercise that Tracy Ressler and I did with essentially, there were 700 over 700 questions across the 29 town committees, application questions that we mapped against the common application question bank that we have in CI. And that was a really helpful process because it helped us understand just how current questions align with, foundations um, um, grant making and some of the guiding principles as well that Kate took us through. So that was really helpful. And I'll kick us off with the short survey that some of you took. We received 46 responses, so thank you so much for participating. I'll also highlight that the survey is still open. The team wanted to keep the avenue if you want to share more feedback or questions or just any concerns or suggestions. It will remain open, so feel free to, even after this meeting ends, if you do want to share any feedback with us, you can share it through the survey. So one of the questions that we asked was around just general feelings towards the common grant application process that we launch in 2026. Most, I would say almost 60% responded optimistically and think it would be a helpful and positive shift in the grant making process. There were some apprehension, some volunteers who highlighted that they were worried about how the new process would impact the current grant making life cycle and approach. And Lucas, could we move to the next slide? So another question was just on where we can, the team can support and give more clarity on various aspects of what the grant making would look like. So these were some of the top that came up. So foundations, grant making practices and priorities, evaluating community needs, post-award, follow-up, reporting, learning. I was really psyched to see this as one of the things that were lifted by most of you. Application review, and how rubric as a tool can support the decision making across all the different towns, and then general application process and format and what that would look like. And there were also a few other areas where volunteers needed guidance or clarity on, which was nonprofit status and due diligence aspects, or what that would look like in the new process, equity considerations in grant making, and then also setting funder priorities. And can we move to the next slide, which is essentially a good segue into more details on some of these points that were lifted. So this was an open-ended question, and about half, I think around 22 people responded to this, but this really helped the team better understand exactly what was needed within each of those buckets. So folks asked for more guidance and clarity on community funds' role, its alignment with the foundation's strategic priorities, and just again, what the new streamlined process would look like. I know we went over some components of those today, and I think the next few slides will take us through some of that, but I guess the team will engage in the next few weeks and months in bringing that clarity in what that process will entail. And then there was a request. This was another. This was also voiced quite frequently, just for additional tools, templates, and resources for community funds grant making. So that was something that was lifted often. And then guidance again on due diligence and financial review components of the grant making process. So annual operating budgets, project budget submissions, nonprofit status, tax IDs, those sort of things. And then another really important point that was lifted was around flexibility. And I think this was raised in the question by, I believe by Laura, was, flexibility in the application questions and the decision-making process so that it reflects the varied, community needs across towns. It would look different. And so the application and the decision-making needs to support that. And then there was some interest raised in deeper dives in other committees' application process, rubric tools, or other tools that they use in the decision making and town-specific priorities. I think someone also lifted more opportunities to just spaces to share learning and engage in person or I guess virtually. So I think that's connected to this. And then another area that was lifted up was on supporting grantees. So ways to promote grantees' work a little better, and then concerns over overburdening applicants with too many questions and not aligned with the grant size or the grant amount. And that's again, just connecting it back to the post-application survey. That is one of the things that the process redesign team really looks at, like across each processes and the grant amounts. Is it equitable for a grantee to engage in the application process for so and so hours. And then there were, just as a bonus point, I also wanted to lift that there were some volunteers who highlighted, their excitement and just, about the upcoming changes, the collaborative process that the team and committees are engaging in, and the information shared so far. Someone gave a shout out for all the email updates, so I just wanted to name that. So yeah, and I can hand over to Melissa, but I'll just pause here if anyone has any questions on which I don't see, I think. But yes, I'm going to hand over to Melissa.
All right. Thank you, Juhi. So let's kind of think about where we are in the process, what the rest of 2025 will look like, and then what 2026 will look like, and how we're going to be continuing to engage you all in that process. So go ahead, Lucas. So first, we want to talk a little bit about grant making roles and really solidifying the role of the committee and the role of the foundation. So in essence, the committee's role is really to provide recommendations to the foundation for funding based on insight and knowledge of community needs. So what does that look like in practice, right? We really want you to have time to be assessing those community needs, to be learning about your community, and to be able to get into the community, right? To be able to learn about it. It also looks like developing a request for proposal, as we've been talking about, that responds to community needs and assessing those proposals that you do receive, right? So as you assess those community needs, it's important that you have the opportunity, and we're making sure you have that opportunity, that if you're seeing a gap, that you can put that as a priority in your RFP. And conducting community outreach, right? So that may look different in each community. I know that I've been privileged to be able to attend a lot of events, even in my short time here, where you all have been engaging in the community in info sessions, in grantee receptions. I know that some of you have even just been at community events, whether that's National Night Out, whether that's the summer concert series, and really just talking to community members and learning about the nonprofits that serve your community and learning about what your community feels they need. The foundation's role is to administer an equitable grant-making process for nonprofit community partners to support community needs. And so what does that look like in practice? Part of that is the common application for community funds, right? We know that in order to be equitable, right, we want to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible for those smaller nonprofits to engage without a grant maker, right? Without a grant writer, I'm sorry. And so part of that, with the common application, they're going to start by developing a profile. So they won't have to continuously add that basic information every time they apply. Another thing is, let's say we have some small nonprofits, for example, I believe their name is Spirit Horse. They are a therapeutic writing organization in Canton that maybe applies to Canton, Avon, and Simsbury, right? Again, such a small nonprofit, they don't have a grant writer, but they can actually kind of use that common application to reduce the amount of time that they're spending in applying to those 3 towns. It also looks like us taking on the burden of due diligence for eligibility, right? I know that I've had a lot of committees that have had to, chase, for lack of a better word, chase grantees down to get that, make sure that they're a 501c3, or be searching the web, the IRS database, or Candid to make sure they're a 501c3. And that burden should not be on you all. We want to make sure that we're taking that burden off of you. It also looks like training and support to all of you, right? And providing those resources in order to carry out your role. And of course, we'll be facilitating those payments to nonprofits. Lucas, go ahead. So when thinking about the 2026 grant making process, some of the things that we have been hearing is it feels like there is a lot of change. And while there is, we also want to be clear on what is changing, but what is not changing. So one thing that is not changing is that committee decision-making power for your recommendations. So you will still have the decision-making power on what nonprofits to recommend, how much funding to recommend for those nonprofits, what priorities you are setting in your request for proposal, any additional, guidance that you're giving in that request for proposal, your marketing and outreach plan, right? All of that will be up to you. You're also going to still have that ability to support and build relationships with applicants in their community, in your communities, right? So through all of those wonderful events that we talked about, through really getting to know those community needs and getting to know the people in your community and how you can support them. What is changing? We're really streamlining the administrative processes, right? So we know that it takes a lot of time on your end. I put a thing in the chat shouting out to Farmington because I know they will be so happy that they don't have to try to take all their different documents and merge them anymore. That was a headache for them, right? But also things like, we don't want you to feel like you have to retweak and reinvent the wheel on your application every year, right? Let us take that burden off of you so that you can focus on the community. We want to simplify the workflow so that it leads to shorter turnaround for approvals. I know that a lot of people, when I was having those chair meetings, were very surprised to know that when you submit all of your recommendations, one person at the foundation, and this is not their sole job, they manually input all of your applications into the system currently. And that's why some of you during the summer months and probably going into now have experienced a bit of a bottleneck, right? We want to shorten that for you so we can turn it around for faster approvals. We also want to get that due diligence to the forefront. So before you even start reviewing your applications, you will know whether they are eligible without having to research whether it's a 501c3. And we will not only give you the eligible applications, but also the ineligible ones and tell you why, right? But that way you are not spinning your wheels and trying to figure it out for yourself. And we don't expect that all of you have that knowledge, right? And we want to make sure that this is an equitable process, not only for our nonprofits, but for people who want to volunteer. And if we're expecting you to know all those random codes, right? And memorize all of those things and figure out all of that. That's not really equitable to you all, right? And just a simpler process for navigation for nonprofits, right? They will be able to know that year after year, they're going back through this process, that their profile is already made in the system, that if they are applying to more than one town, they are using the same process. They know they can anticipate the questions that are being asked and make it easier for them. So you will still have, again, those decision-making power for your RFP priorities and amounts, your grant making timeline, marketing outreach, who and how much to attend, and any community events that you want to put on or attend. So looking at that in terms of a timeline. Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention as well, in the grant making system, your reports will also be built in. So that's one less administrative burden taken off of your plate, while you will still have those answers just like you will for the application. One less thing that you all have to worry about in getting those reports out to people. So in looking at the timeline, we are here in October. We are going to begin publishing and maintaining an evolving frequently asked questions document, starting with some of the questions that were asked multiple times in our chair interviews or chair meetings. We're going to host some volunteer listening sessions on those process updates, and foundation staff is going to begin drafting that common application based on the research that Juhi was speaking of. In November, our grant making pause begins on the 16th. We are hoping to share that first draft of common applications and run listening sessions. So Laura, that this kind of answers your question here in November. We will be sharing that draft, and we will be looking to you to ask, are there any blind spots? Are there things that we're not seeing or we're not understanding? Is there data that really is important that we're not capturing here? We can then start to discuss training and support needs with all of you based on what you're seeing, what you're hearing about the process. In December, we're going to start to discuss those input and learnings at our town hall, our Q4 town hall, and we're going to outline the beta testing plan for early 2026. So January to March, this is where we will share the finalized common application process and develop training and guidance materials. We'll implement grant making training for all of our volunteers, and we're going to be beta testing the application and the process, full process with nonprofits. In April, our grant making pause ends, so we will have that go live. No jokes about it, Pam. It really is our go live, not just April Fool's joke. And we're going to provide those resources and training for all of you and implement feedback loops so that as issues come up, we can quickly address them and keep you up to date. And I'm just going to answer Kathy's question really quickly here. So currently, when the foundation conducts due diligence, after your recommendations go through, they're doing things like making sure that it is a 501c3 or that the fiscal sponsor is a 501c3. They're contacting the fiscal sponsor and making sure they're aware and they have given permission to be that fiscal sponsor. They're looking at anything that might be tied with the town and making sure that all of those ducks are in a row. They're looking at contact information. They're looking at finance in the background. So there is a lot of due diligence that takes place that you may or may not have been aware of already. Some of that is going to happen as soon as those applications are put in. So luckily, the system can do some of those things as well in making sure that that EIN number connects to a 501c3, and we can begin those conversations because we have that information in our system and we can start it earlier. Currently, we don't, right? So currently, we have to input it and then start that process after you've submitted your recommendations. All right, so now I'm going to hand it over to Tashina.
Thank you, Melissa. I have the pleasure of wrapping us up this evening, and I will make it quick so that we are able to get on with dinner and the rest of our engagements. If you are like me, you have a bedtime story to read, so I won't keep you all waiting. So we're going to just quickly review some of these dates and information has been discussed at some point or another during tonight's conversation. But if I can have a virtual drum roll for our announcement that is coming up. Lucas, next slide. Ta-da! This is, we are going to have our very first ever Greater Together Volunteer Summit. The date is on the calendar for Saturday, February 28th, 2026, with an inclement weather date for Saturday, March 7th. It will be hosted in our, thank you, Kelly, I see your drums, at Goodwin University. And we are going to be, there are lots of ways that we want to make sure that volunteers are a part of this process, are a part of the summit, not just during the actual event, but leading up to. Big things that we want to be able to celebrate and get your input on are how do we recognize volunteers? So there, Melissa and I and Lucas and the team, we are all putting our heads together around a process for volunteers to nominate one another. And how do we make sure that there is space for us to feel celebrated, and we can have some shared learnings between the different committees and the foundation and all of us as individuals. So we'll be reaching out to you for feedback in terms of celebration. How do you want to be recognized? But we also want to create space for volunteers to be able to show us how, just some general information sharing. And so we're working with the location and the event planner just to see how logistically we can make something like that work. But we definitely want to get in touch with all of you in the next coming weeks so we can narrow down some topics that you all want to hear, not just from the foundation, but from each other. Next slide, please. And just to conclude the rest of 2025, if we can even believe it, that this year is nearly over. And I spoke to the volunteer summit, which we will have, and we will be looking for your input, and that will be coming soon. Again, we'll be sharing the common application. The grant making pause will start on December 16th, technically. So please send over your recommendations by the 15th at the latest. We all should have received a save the date from Jay regarding the foundation gala. If you haven't, please reach out to your liaison. Teresa, we all got the same mysterious email. So other than the email for the gala, that with the save the date, that's all the information we know at this time. Unless Jay's on the call and he wants to share. If Jay's still here, he can come back and tell us.
No, I mean, the email that you got and the invitation provided the date, the location, and an encouragement that you want to be in the room where it happens. So
that's all we're left with, Teresa, unfortunately.
and to get fancy.
And to get fancy. There is that.
And to get fancy, right.
So whatever fancy looks like for you, please come in your fanciest attire. It doesn't have to be a suit and tie or a tuxedo or a ball gown, just whatever. If that's your thing, then go for it. But it's not a requirement by any means. And to wrap up the year, we will have our town hall after the gala. And then we are hoping that in our individual committee meetings that we will start doing some planning, some intentional work planning for 2026, knowing that committees are going to be ready to release their grant cycles at the top of Q2. So we want to make sure that we are all prepared. Next slide, please. And as we're looking ahead towards Q1 of 2026, please be on the lookout for the updates to the volunteer handbook. We'll have fresh 2026 volunteer agreements ready for folks. We will again have our work planning opportunities as committees will work together with their liaison to facilitate those. And obviously those are not binding, but just giving us an idea of how we can plan and be intentional. We will begin beta testing the grant making process. And of course, we have our volunteer summit. And I am realizing that the date is we have both the 27th and the 28th, but it is going to be on February 28th. So, all right. And we are exactly at time. How'd I do? Thank you so much, everyone. Please, I know that this was a lot of information tonight. Please, please, please reach out to either myself, Melissa, anyone on the team. If you're looking for clarification, happy to reaffirm some of this information at upcoming committee meetings. And thank you all so much.
Thank you all. Stay well.